And look at that. We're back for round two this week on the Marketing Spotlight. I have with me today Terry Rice, rhymes with Jerry Rice, one of the greatest wide receivers of all time. I don't know if you got wide receiver skills or not.
I do. And in high school, I wore his number 80. So that way, when they said my name, it echoed. It sounded like Jerry Rice a little bit.
Check it out. That is awesome. Where'd you play ball? Was it on the West Coast?
No, New York.
In New York. Okay. Fantastic. Yeah. Terry, thanks for joining us. You're going to be a speaker next week at the Digital Summit at Home, Small and Medium Businesses, which kicks off on Monday with our master classes. But you're actually going to be speaking on Tuesday. But before we get to Terry, let's just do a quick bio. Terry's a business development consultant and a staff writer at Entrepreneur Magazine. He's a founder of Terry Rice Consulting, and he helps entrepreneurs grow their brand and revenue without sacrificing their health, family, or personal interests. His focus is advising professionals on how to launch or scale their knowledge-based businesses. He's also an adjunct professor at NYU, where he leads workshops for career-driven individuals. And I got to ask him, a huge Professor Galloway fan. Any chance you know him?
I've seen him in passing. We're not necessarily like, connecting every day, but I'm aware of who he is. Yeah.
Yeah, he's fantastic. He's a rock star. And I realized I forgot to get that one banner off there. So, Terry, tell us a little bit about your session you got scheduled for next week, which is LinkedIn optimization for entrepreneurs and SMBs. What can we expect?
Well, my goal is to remove the barriers that so many people have in regards to posting on LinkedIn, such as what should I talk about? How often should I post? How do I respond to comments, so on and so forth? Because only 1% of LinkedIn's monthly active users post at least once a week. So if you can do that, if I can get you over that hump, you'll finally be in the 1% and reap all those rewards.
Like, how often should I post? So what advice do you have there?
How often can you be interesting? I'm joking. Well, I would say at least once a week. Post at least once a week. But outside of that, commenting. You can comment at least 5 times a week, because if you just post, first of all, you won't learn anything new because you're not engaging with the platform. And then beyond that, you won't get as many views for your content because there's no reciprocity going on. So for starters, I always say just post once a week. And if you're not sure what to post, do this. Think of 10 questions that your audience has, right? And you know those questions better than I ever will. Think of 10 questions your audience has and then answer them, because questions create content, right? That's why Google works so well. People are searching for answers, right? You're proactively sending these questions. But if you think to yourself, you know what, Terry, I can't even think of 10 questions that my audience has. That tells you have to do some more research on your audience, right? Because you don't know them well enough if you can't think of those 10 questions. So if you just do that just once a week, you already have 2.5 months worth of content ready.
And what are some of the kind of questions that feel more engaging? Is there a way to ask, like I know some of the social media platforms, you kind of want to leave it open-ended, not a yes or no sort of answer, so you get those responses. So what advice would you have in regards to that?
Well, I think the very first thing is not just kind of talking to your audience, but having a conversation. So for me, I work with consultants. So I would say, do you struggle with knowing how much to price your services? Do you always kind of queasy when that part of the conversation comes up? You are not alone. Many consultants rank that as their number one challenge in regards to landing new deals. Here's an easy process to do that. First of all, justify, the investment and why it's worth it based on the COI, which is the cost of inaction, and the ROI, the return on investment. So, I'm going further down than I normally would. And then at the end, I would say, hey, what are your thoughts on this? What are some approaches you've used before? And the reason why that's so important is because you want to have an engagement prompt at the end of every post. You can't just say, okay, well, I'm done. I'll talk to you later, right? So ask for someone else's experience. Ask them if they agree or disagree. Ask them what else they would add. But again, make sure you're having a conversation, not just talking to your audience.
Yeah, and we're talking more of like a personal brand, right? Are there different rules that you would follow or you would suggest if you're responsible for your company's LinkedIn page?
Yeah, so with a personal brand, your goal is to not be boring, right? That's why you have to show aspects of your personality. Now, to your point, it gets a little tricky when you're representing a company. And I actually train companies on how to teach their employees on how to do LinkedIn marketing as well, because there's this data from Salesforce that said if you actually attract a lead to your business because they discovered you and refer you internally, those leads convert at 14%, which is much higher than any other channel. So it behooves you to encourage your knowledge-based experts to post more on LinkedIn, but you have to give them these constraints. Therefore, you have to have core values for your company. right? If you don't set people up for success with those guardrails, you're in trouble. So what do we stand for? We stand for autonomy. We stand for compassion. We stand for so on and so forth. Then you can get as creative as you want, so long as you're not reaching outside of you. So it's really on the company to establish that first. Then the individual knows what's okay and what's not okay.
Now, when posting content, there's the ability to create an article on LinkedIn, right? You can go in there and use the editing tools. You can also do a rather lengthy post, but I believe it gets a cutoff after so many characters. And then, of course, you could drive traffic away from the platform if you wanted to link them to your site. What are the strategic advantages to each of those?
So articles are great. I mean, they're more or less a blog that you can have on LinkedIn. The benefit of that is you can express more information, right? You can have a longer narrative. The downside is people don't read articles as much as they read posts because they're long, right? So I'm not saying don't do it, but just manage your expectations. Also realize articles get picked up by SEO. So you can actually rank for that on Google with your articles. Your posts will not do that. So I strongly recommend, yes, having an article, but maybe having a post promoted as well, like just some of the key takeaways. And then from there, if people choose to go ahead and read that article. Now, posts are great. The character limit is 1,300, so you have to be somewhat succinct. And often shorter posts work better because they're in a hurry, right? You know how it goes. So shorter posts work better typically, but you want to avoid bunching up your content. Like you don't want to have like paragraph after paragraph after paragraph. Don't space it out in an annoying way where it's like one sentence or one word per line, but just kind of break it up a little bit.
Yeah, why do people
visually.
do that? I was just going to ask that. That seems like a trend with this one line.
Because unfortunately it works. Unfortunately it works. It's called broetry. So if you want to be a bro, go for it. But what you do is you start off with some kind of vague yet sensational line. I couldn't believe it was happening. And then next step is, but there it was up before my eyes. And it just kind of goes into like, I found my sock, it's like something ridiculous half the time. But unfortunately that works. And there were people that were very good at it to the point where LinkedIn actually tossed them off the platform because they were mocking LinkedIn and their algorithm of how they cracked the algorithm. And got removed from the platform as a result. So don't be that person, but just do realize that if you have it bunched up in like 5 or 10 sentences, it is harder to read, and therefore you do want to break it up a little bit.
Yeah, and so one of the things that you kind of see too is, or let's go back to what you're saying. I think you said it was 1,300. Is it characters or words?
Characters.
Characters. So is there a sweet spot where it gets truncated, where you want to say like, hey, at least get these so many characters at the top so you can get people to expand on that? And is there a suggested amount? As you were saying, people scroll, limited time that's on there. Where's sort of that sweet spot?
Yeah, so after the third line, that's where the see more button comes up. So you want to have a good eye-catching opening line like, hey, are you a sales agent and you want to find the best way to increase your revenue? Here's a tip that that's worked for me in the past. But you would have a space between those two lines. And then after that's going to say see more. Now, when people hit that see more button, that's a clue to LinkedIn. This is good content. Someone's expanded upon it. So that's why your opening line can't be basic. It can't be like, do you like workshops? like no one's going to stop for that. It has to be like, are you confused about how to market your SaaS company in 2020 or 2021? Here's a solution that's worked for thousands of my customers, and then hit the see more button. Right? You want to have this thumb-stopping content, but the thing is, you can't tease it out with this sensational content and then have fluff afterwards. Because like, if I said, click here for free pizza, then it said, ha, 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 you're going to say this dude's a jerk. And you would then say hide or unfollow, which would then hurt you in the algorithm.
Yeah, you want to provide something of value, because I think posting on LinkedIn, whether it's an article or things that you do for your personal brand, is you're trying to show not only your personal brand, but some subject matter expertise. So doing something like click here for pizza doesn't do you any good, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Now let's move on to like the profile. I know in your session, one of the things we talked about is after this session, you're going to be able to set up your LinkedIn profile for success in communicating why your audience would want to work with you and your company. So what are some tips there without giving too much away your session next week? Because we want people to buy a pass and come.
Yeah, please do. Yeah, so here's the biggest way people mess up is they more or less copy and paste their resume or their bio. You don't want to do that. It's boring. Like I'm sure you have a great resume. I don't want to read it, right? And beyond that, your bio should be about your audience and how you help them, not how cool you are and how you went to this college and you got this degree and like these awards. You want to say like, do you have this situation? Maybe it's this. Oh gosh, I understand you. And that's why I help people just like you do this through this process. And here's some proof of concept by way of testimonials or third-party validation. But it's like, I'm sure you've been on a date before. The person just talks about themselves the whole time. You're like, yeah, really? When's the food coming here? This is boring, right? You don't want to be that person on LinkedIn either, right? Because it's about their audience. You showing that I empathize with you and I want to guide you and help you. It's kind of like that, the whole Donald Miller story brand principle, where your audience is the hero and you're the guide, right? So you want to reflect the fact they're on this journey, they need your help, and you're there to guide them.
Yeah. It's one of the 7 habits of highly effective people is the ability to get others to talk about themselves. And so you're hitting right on it. One of the other, my biggest pet peeves on LinkedIn is when I get requests from people, but they just hit this lazy, like, connect. They don't take the time to write a note. Like, why do you want to connect? Right. And if it's out of the blue, someone I completely don't recognize, I'm personally inclined to not take that connection. So tips for anyone who's using LinkedIn to try to grow their network. What do you see in that regard?
Yeah, well, let me answer what was almost a question is, do you accept that person or not? What I normally do is I look at their profile and I think, would I proactively reached out to them? And if the answer is yes, I'll accept them and I'll say, hey, by the way, why'd you reach out? And if I don't get a response, then I'm like, okay, well, why don't you reach out? Then I might just remove them. But there's been so many times when someone reached out blindly, no context, and I say, hey, why'd you reach out? And like, oh, we want to have you speak at this conference. Are you available? I'm like, why didn't you say it in the first place? Like, like that would have been nice to know initially. Yes, I would like to get paid money to talk. Can we please do so? But when you're reaching out to people that you don't know, pre-qualify why you're doing it. Hey, I saw you posted this last week about this, and then yesterday you posted that as well. I just want to reach out because what you're doing is great. And I also signed up to your email as you mentioned this. Thought that was great. Would love to connect. Right? Just anything to prove that you are aware of who they are as a person and what their work is, what they're doing for their business, and interact with them. Like that we can say, I posted this yesterday. I don't know if you saw it or not, but or we've been going back and forth, through comments. I just want to reach out formally and say hello. Whatever it is, just make it as bespoke to that person as you can. But that's why you can't just kind of throw out like a bunch of random invites. Just think strategically, who do I want to meet on this platform and why? And then make a list and then go through that list and say, okay, cool, that's what I'm going to reach out to.
Yeah. And so with your consulting company, what are some of the things you're working on right now? Some interesting clients or work you might have coming.
A few things. Actually, I wrote a book that came out Tuesday of this week.
Oh, fantastic! Congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah, I wrote it through Entrepreneur Magazine, and I started writing it 2019, and then COVID hit, and like half the stuff I said made no sense. I'm like, hey, when you meet someone, shake their hand and look them in the eye and get real, like all this stuff is like irrelevant. And I'm like, maybe you should do remote consulting too. Think about that. So I rewrote it all to reflect more current times and even more current tools like Clubhouse and things like that. So that came out Tuesday, and really excited about that. And then I also have an online course that I'm selling, which is aligned with the book about how to launch a consulting business. But the thing I like most about that is through the course, I also offer office hours. So I get to talk to people every week about their challenges and solve them for them. So that's really it. That and raising 3 kids. You probably hear one of them yelling in the background right now. So that's what I'm up to.
No, I love it. I got 3 of my own. They're a little bit older. So if they were yelling right now, that means they're probably fighting.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. What's the title of the book? I don't think you mentioned it.
It's called Start Your Own Consulting Business. So, going for the SEO, going for the SEO ranking there, right?
That's fantastic. You mentioned something about the book, and now, I wanted to what like did you really specifically have to update the book because of COVID? Or were you just being like a little bit more conscious about some of the things that were in there?
Well, I think there's
I wasn't sure if you were being tongue in cheek there or not.
No, definitely, because there's a subset of people right now who are consultants who weren't really planning on it, right? They worked at some corporation for years, unfortunately got laid off, and like, you know what? I'm just gonna do my own thing now. And I want to speak to those challenges because it seems like it might be so hard. I'm like, look, you don't need a website. You don't need all these extra things. Like, you just have to be clear about what you do and who you do it for. and I'll guide you through that. But then beyond that, the world has changed. Like, I mean, before, like, you would not grow your brand as much through webinars and talks like this. You're like, oh, you got to get out in person, you know, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But we've decoupled work and workplace to an extent where it doesn't matter if you live in a small town in the middle, you know, wherever, or a large city like New York, like I do. Your client base has expanded, but your mindset has expanded with it. Because I've talked to people, and they're like, oh, I consult restaurants in like the Boston area. I'm like, why does Boston? Are you doing it through Zoom? Go. What about New York? You know, what about Detroit? What about, you know, the Twin Cities, whatever. So I really wanted to hammer down on that, and the fact that you can now own your knowledge. You can own your knowledge and get paid what you deserve, as opposed to necessarily, you know, taking whatever rate that people give you when you're working at one corporation or another. So that's the overwhelming message. If you want to do that, giving people a guide for how they can.
Yeah. And so let's go back to talking about like your LinkedIn strategy. Obviously, it's all centered around getting leads, right? Especially if you're doing consulting. You wrote a book on starting consulting. What are some other metrics that someone might want to be looking at to gauge success on that platform? And I'm going to follow that up with, are there best practices that you teach for using LinkedIn that you would suggest you taking to your other like social profiles?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head initially by saying it's more than just leads, really. Because if you just go on there for leads, you will project lack and scarcity, and people can smell that a mile away. Part of it is you understanding your audience more through the content that you create, they create, and how you engage with each other, right?
Yeah.
That's how you learn. It's also building partnerships where someone might see you talking and saying, hey, can you come talk to our audience as well? We like your vibe. We like what you're talking about and your personality. So it's that as well. But the best way to, if you want to get down to the nuts and bolts of it, is to look at your KPIs, your key performance indicators. It's not likes, it's not comments. It's direct messages saying, I see what you're doing. How can I learn more? And or having some kind of lead magnet. I'm sure most people are familiar with that. My lead magnet is a one-page business plan for coaches and consultants. So once in a while, I'll mention that and I'll say, are you struggling with how you're structuring your business? I created this one-page business plan. Check it out now. And one day, I remember I got 105 downloads in one day, just from one post on LinkedIn, $0 invested, right? So my cost per lead was it was nothing. Yeah. And my conversions from that were pretty good too. But the way that you earn the right to be that transactional is by providing value with your content as well. Of course. And I want to kind of double down on that personal branding part of it. So right now, like, you know, we're talking, you hear my kids yelling in the background. I actually had a post about that saying in the early days of COVID, I used to always apologize for how much noise my kids were making in the background. My clients always said, you know what, it's okay. We don't mind. We don't care. We care about you and what you have to say. So my post about that started off by saying, people don't care about your kids. Here's how I found out, ... And everyone's like, what the hell? People don't care about your kids. What? And then I just told you the same story. I said, if you're so concerned about the noise your kids are making in the other room that you can't be fully present when you're talking, you know, on a call like this, you're not going to be a fully present parent or a fully present professional. So therefore just say, hey, I got kids, and then move forward. That gives you the right to then later say, by the way, here's how I feed these kids. Click here to download this business plan. That's why it's so important to have that personal brand.
That's great. You know, there was a great story someone shared on LinkedIn about doing, you know, nowadays we're doing interviews virtually, right? To bring someone into the office and shake hands and sit around a conference room table and interview, not happening. And so this woman had shared this experience that she had apologized. She had run into an issue with the sitter or daycare, what have you. And she was like, I've got my 3-year-old here. And so the guy who was interviewing and said, you know what, I have my 3-year-old here too. Why don't we go just bring them both on our camera? And so they did a lap session and interviewed her, and they made her relax. And it was a cool story. So you're right. I think there's become this acceptance level. And we even see with our virtual events we're doing, like the one next week, is dog barks in the background or something. Get it? You know, we're all at home. It's cool. So that leads me to my next question, though, is on LinkedIn, you see a lot of people using videos. I'm not a fan of the sitting in your driver's seat and like doing. I don't know why people feel they got to do these moments of Zen sitting in their driver's seat, right? But what do you think about that? And any tips for using video on your personal brand?
Yeah, well, I don't have a car, so don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, you live in New York. Yeah, that'd be crazy.
Yeah, I'm in New York City. I mean, what works for your audience is what works for your audience. So for some people, that works as long as that's the thing. We're digital marketers, right? Do you have KPIs to tell you this is working? Okay, who am I to tell you it's not working? But if you're wondering why it's not working and you're sitting in your car just talking, it's because you're sitting in your car just talking. Like, you know what I mean? So I'm a fan of like testing things out and, you know, seeing if it does work. But if you clearly are getting data that says this is not working very well, then stop. But I think, I know you hear the siren in the background.
Yeah,
I
I've been in
think
the city enough. I know that sound. Yeah.
yeah. And even for me, like when I'm doing these things, I'm like, if you've never been to New York, here's your chance to vicariously experience it. There's a siren, right? But going back to the video, I mean, just so you know, by design, you're going to get less views. Videos get less views than text-based content. So manage your expectations around that. But beyond that, what I found is some of my videos get less views, but the impact is so much deeper. So I'd rather get 100 views of someone watching me for 3 minutes than 10,000 views of someone thinking, "Oh, that guy's kind of funny. What's next? What's next? What's next?" Right?
Yeah.
Because I've had videos that were literally a little bit too long for LinkedIn. Let's say 4 minutes long, and one video specifically, I put it out on a Thursday. By Friday, I made $4,000 from it. Just to give you some like numbers, right? So it's like it works, you know. So that's a good KPI to have, but I think the benefit of video is it lets people see your personality more, because for me, I'm very sarcastic and that doesn't always translate well during text. I just sound rude, right? But I'm like, no, I'm joking around, right? So it shows, yeah. You know,
yeah, I'm sarcastic. I know.
Yeah, you need that sarcasm font. So I think it shows the more personal side of yourself, and mixing that in with other content, which such as text and images, can work. But again, if you're not getting anything from it, that's a sign that you have to do something different.
Yeah. A buddy taught me a trick, and then I started doing it in emails, which is you're familiar with HTML code, right?
Correct.
So you use like the carets, and for when you do like font and then close the tag, you do like sarcasm tag.
I dig that. Yeah, I need that in my life. Yeah.
Yeah. There's times when I've done that, and I've had people who know me go, "I know you well enough that you were being sarcastic, but I'm glad you put that in there, because otherwise I might have been offended."
Yeah.
So
I like that.
got a few of those moments. Terry, this was fantastic. We usually try to keep this around 20 minutes. This is great. I look forward to seeing you next week. I'm going to give you the last minute or a couple seconds here, whatever, to kind of close it out. If people want to find you on LinkedIn or follow you on Twitter, what do you recommend? What do you got going on?
Yeah, LinkedIn, it's just Terry Rice. You'll see me smiling, looking at something aspirationally. And then Instagram's actually a bit better than Twitter. And literally the name is It's Terry Rice. So you can find me on there. But really, I'm looking forward to talking to everyone, because I feel the challenge with LinkedIn is everyone feels like they should sound smart, and that can be intimidating. But you're already experts, right? You already know, how to do your job. But if you feel like you have to sound like extra smart or you're messing up, that's going to limit the amount of content you post. So really, I just want you to get out of your own way and express your zone of genius however you see fit, and get rewarded for who you are, not just what you do. And that's what I'm looking forward to talking about.
That's great. We look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks, everybody who had a chance to join. And for those of you that are watching the recording, either on Facebook or YouTube, we appreciate you checking in. And hopefully you get a chance to see us at Digital Summit at Home next week. If not, go to our site, digitalsummit.com, and look for one of the other future conferences we have coming up. Terry, again, thanks again. And we'll go ahead and close this out.
Thanks.